If you've made it this far in our series, you've probably figured out that I and those who sponsor these videos are Sabbath keepers. You're correct. I've known about and have regularly kept the Sabbath for over 50 years. But it wasn't always that way. I grew up in a family that went to church almost every Sunday. Every Saturday we shopped and played football and worked in the yard and did all of those things everyone around us was doing. But in my teen years, my father began to learn about the Sabbath. And the more he learned, the more he realized that this was not something he could just ignore. As he shared what he was learning, it became obvious to all of us that a decision to keep the weekly Sabbath would have quite an impact on our lives. Like most people, we began by thinking of all the negatives, the things we wouldn't be able to do anymore. It took a while before we began to realize that the blessings would be far greater than anything we had to give up. Making the commitment to keep the Sabbath can be intimidating. Most of us live in societies that are largely incompatible with the idea of a weekly day of rest. This is a 24/7 world, and we're used to having everything immediately. We have stores that are open all day, every day. We can order items from the other side of the world and have them on our doorstep within hours. That kind of world demands a lot from us. If the world is always rushing around us, then we have to be rushing too, don't we? It feels as if there's a constant demand to use our time more and more efficiently, to respond quicker, to accomplish more in shorter periods of time, to push ourselves further and further beyond our limits. How can anyone keep the Sabbath in a world like that? After all, the fourth commandment was etched into those stone tablets more than 3,000 years ago. The world has changed a lot since then. Is it even possible to stop on the Sabbath and still keep up with today's world? When we face a decision like this, we'd like to have some kind of assurance. Assurance that taking this leap of faith and keeping God's Sabbath isn't going to make life impossible for us. God's assurances are given in the form of promises. Here are a few you may want to consider as you decide what you're going to do about what you've been learning. 1 Peter 5, verse 7 tells us we can give our concerns to Him because He cares for us. 1 Samuel 16, verse 7 assures us that His perspective is vastly superior to ours. And Romans 8:28 tells us that He can produce good from situations that seem impossible to us. In fact, God takes delight in doing what humans think impossible. God doesn't hang us out to dry when we keep His Sabbath. He designed it to be a blessing, and it is a blessing, but it's also a test. Observing the Sabbath requires us to trust God, to trust that He knows what He's doing, and to trust that He will take care of us, even if we're not sure how He'll do it or what His exact plan is. Keeping the Sabbath in the modern world can seem almost impossible, but the reality is it's entirely doable. Taking the first step down the path of obedience and faith can be scary, but it can be done. Thousands and thousands of people have done it before you. They're still walking that path week after week, and they'll tell you it's worth it. The benefits from keeping the Sabbath far outweigh anything it might cost. Keeping God's Sabbath can bring us a deeper relationship with God, a closer relationship with His people, a better understanding of His purpose for our life, and some much-needed rest. If these are things we want in our lives, there's really only one choice. We need the Sabbath. It's logical to wonder how we will ever keep up with all of the demands life hurls at us if we take a day out of our busy week to keep the Sabbath. Maybe we could find a couple of hours to go to church, but that's not all God tells us to do, is it? Perhaps we need to begin with a different perspective because, you see, it really isn't our week in the first place. Every moment of our lives is a gift from God. He tells us that He gives us 6 days every week to do the things that are important to us. But He also tells us that the seventh day isn't ours at all. It belongs to Him. And He's the one who has the right to tell us how to use it. So how do we do it? How exactly can we go about keeping the Sabbath holy? Let us share a few helpful suggestions to get you started. The fourth commandment tells us to remember the Sabbath. God did not intend for the Sabbath to be a surprise. As we go about our daily life during the other 6 days that God gives us, we need to remember the Sabbath. We know in advance that the biblical Sabbath is observed from sunset Friday night to sunset Saturday night, so we can give some thought throughout the other 6 days to the things we might do to prepare to make our observance of the Sabbath more enjoyable and beneficial. For example, some celebrate the arrival of the Sabbath with a special Friday night dinner. They go a little above and beyond their usual meals to make it special and to set the tone for the rest of the Sabbath. As we get to know other Sabbath keepers, we may wish to occasionally invite them to enjoy it with us. The Sabbath provides special time for the family. We should take advantage of the 24 hours we've been given, study passages of the Bible together, share the things we've learned that week, and strengthen those family relationships with conversation and quality time. Speaking of study, it's good to set aside time on the Sabbath for reading, praying, and meditating. Just as in human relationships, getting closer to God requires spending time with Him, speaking to Him in prayer, and listening to Him by studying His inspired Word. We've also seen that God expects us to assemble together with fellow believers on His Sabbath day. Being able to meet with and learn from those who share our beliefs and are trying to live by God's instructions is important. But how do we find those fellow believers? Well, if you'd like to know more about the church that sponsors these videos, the Church of God, a worldwide association, you're welcome to visit our website, www.cagua.org. Click on the link for congregations, and you'll find locations and phone numbers so you can contact a local pastor. They'll be happy to answer any of your questions and to help you find what you're looking for. In this short series, we've not tried to address every possible question about the Sabbath. If you want more information about the Sabbath and how to keep it, you'll also find many articles here on the lifehopeandtruth.com website as well. The Sabbath is a blessing, and it can be a blessing in your life too. The first step in keeping it holy in our modern world is simply the act of choosing to keep it holy. Only you can make that choice. We hope you'll make it. There's an exciting journey ahead of you, and it begins on God's holy day.